Okay, we're going to do some shading on the pears, and I've added some raw sienna to the palette, which is this kind of golden brown color, and I'm going to use some type of dry brush. This is a Royal Sable Tech short round. They also have Royal Sables, which are natural hair. The Sable Techs are a synthetic fiber that is similar to what the natural hair Royal Sables are, but they're a little bit more durable. And we're going to start on this pear on the left side, and I'm adding a little bit of the faux finish medium. Let's put some out here on the palette so that stays clean. And I'm loading a little bit of that into the brush. You don't want it too much on the brush because you want to keep it just a really light coat. And then we're going to pick up a little bit of that raw sienna, and the faux finish medium will help the paint spread a little bit more and stay a little more movable as you're doing your shading. So I want to start here along the edge of the basket and scrub in some of that color up along the edge of that basket, and as you come down around the bottom, stay on the edge. And softened. We're going to just feather that out to nothing there. I'll wipe my brush up a little bit, and we want to soften that color out to nothing as we come up here to the right side of the pear. So you can see we've got some dark that softens out to just the background color. So this will be our first layer of shading on the pear. And we're going to go along and do this to all the pears, and then we'll come back and deepen that shading. So the next one I'm going to work on is this one here in the back. I always sort of like to work from back to front, so again, just a little bit of that faux finish medium. You don't want too much. And pick up a little bit of the raw sienna, and we're going to come this little space where the pears all come together. And this back pear, since it's behind everything, is going to be the darkest one. So most of it's going to get shading on it. We're going to come up both sides. And your highlight's going to be here on the very tip top. Wipe the brush out a little bit and just soften that raw sienna as you come up. The next one we'll pick is this one, which is behind this pear in front. Again, just a teeny bit of the faux finish medium, a little bit of the raw sienna on your brush, and let's work along this line where this pear goes behind the one in front. You always want to shade where things are behind something else, because the front thing is blocking the light, so it's going to create a little cast shadow back there in the darkest areas. And we're going to have our light source kind of coming from the right side, so you're going to leave a lot of light area here on the right side of the pears, and the left side will have a little more shadow. So we're going to again work some shadow up that left side, and I'm just scrubbing this paint in, and as the paint kind of comes off the brush and I'm working towards the right, you're getting less and less paint, so that softens that down. Let me go back on this one and put just a little bit more shadow here on the left side of that. And we'll be adding shadows to these, building it up in layers, but you can see where that goes. So let's do this one here on the left side. Get a little bit more of the faux finish medium, and I'm just working with a little bit that's here on the palette. I'm not really getting into the pile because I don't want too much of it. I don't want the paint to get too soupy. Side. And then just scrub that paint out. And that faux finish medium has a little bit of extender in it so that it keeps your paint moist. It's almost gives you a little bit of the effect of working with oil paints. So we're going to scrub that out as we come over to the right, and we'll leave this area here, the background color, for the highlight. And then finally we've got this hair here on the right side. Pick up a little more paint. We're going to work along the bottom of the rim. Shade a little bit here on the left edge because our light, remember, is coming from over here. And then scrub that out into the area that's going to be the highlight. And we can bring a little bit of this up where the pears tucked behind the handle of the basket and the little tag. A little bit of a shadow behind those. So we've got this little area here that's going to be a highlight. Now we need to keep adding some stronger shading on it, so let's go back down to this bottom pear. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the raw sienna again, but this time we're going to add a little bit of the raw umber to it. I just want to step that up a notch in shading. So we're going to come down here. And these little triangle areas, like where this bottom of the pear meets the basket, comes to a little point. These are going to be some of your darkest areas, so that's where we're going to start working a little bit more dark down in there. If you get too much paint, just pinch it out on your paper towel, and then I'm just scrubbing that in to soften it. You don't want to totally come over and cover all of your raw sienna, but you can see now we've got a little bit darker darks down in here. And we're going to go through all of our pears again in the same fashion. We're going to pick up a little raw sienna, pick up a little bit of a raw umber, and we're going to come down in this little crevice here, this very back pear, and put some dark down, and we can go a little darker on that. Because this pear is going to have a lot of shadow on it where it sits behind all the other pears. So I'll pinch that out a little bit, soften that shadow up. And we're going to come up here more on the right side of the pear where it's sitting behind, and this is going to be like a cast shadow. Probably be your darkest shadow on that pear. It's going to be up along this edge. So you can see now we're creating a little more depth with that shadow back there. And again, I'm mixing up kind of a little darker value of the raw sienna and the raw umber. And we're going to come here along this pear. And at this stage of the painting, we're really not worrying so much about colors. We're just establishing values. You know, we're just using just all these various shades of brown to get the values, and you know, the values are what add form to your shapes. So again, you can start seeing a little more shape of these pears coming together. I'm adding a little bit of the darker shadow here where a pear kind of curves in here, and you put a little dark that comes in kind of at a little crescent. It gives that pear a kind of a top rounded and a bottom rounded area. Do that on this one just a little bit, scrub just a little bit. Should be the bottom of the top, the little top cone of the pear. Okay, just keep going. I'm going to work on this one over here, and I'm going to keep the darkest darks down here towards the bottom left. That'll be your biggest area of darkened shadows. Just softening that into the first layer that we did, that was just the raw sienna. Now again, on this top, if we pull that shadow in just a little bit here, you'll get that established kind of curve of the pear. So it has this top area that kind of swirls in, and the bottom area, kind of like two cylinder, well, not cylinders, two balls, I guess. But you can kind of see the little belly of the pear now have some shape. And now over to this front pear. Again, a little bit of the faux finish medium, some raw sienna, pick up a little raw umber. And we're going to shade here along the bottom of this, where it's sitting in the basket. We're not trying to cover all of the first layer of raw sienna we put down. We're just softly blending a little darker value along the edges. I think on this one I'm going to put a little bit darker up here at the top. Still seems a little... We want this pear more to sit in the background, so I think we need to tone it down just a little bit more. pushes it more into the background. Okay, we're still going to need a little bit more darker darks on the pears, so I'm going to switch down to a smaller Sable Text brush. The first one I was using was a number 10, and the smaller one is a number 8. And when I'm working with these and using them for more of this dry brushing technique, I don't like to clean them in water in between, so I'll put some hand sanitizer in it, and that'll keep the paint from hardening. And the hand sanitizer, because it's mostly alcohol, once we wipe it out, it'll dry quickly. You won't have that water up in the ferrule that'll run down when you're trying to dry brush. So I switched to a number 8, and we're going to go a little darker again. And each time as you go darker, you're going to do a smaller area. So again, I'm using a little bit of the faux finish medium. Now this time we're just going to go strictly to the raw umber. And let's see, come down here in this corner. We're going to keep that more in this little triangle area. We can take several layers to build up the darkest values. A little bit more of that up along the edge. But you can see right down here we're starting to get really dark, which is what we want. That's a little corner that's going to get the least amount of light, so we want that dark and set back in the picture. Next we're going to come up here on that very back pear, and I find it easier to turn it upside down to get in there. So I'm going to tuck in some really dark right in that bottom edge, and I'm trying to put it in smooth so I'm not getting too fuzzy an edge on my pears. And as we come up, just start softening that out. Sort of like, almost like you're sculpting the shapes out of the flat surface. And this one now, we want this little triangle over here to be the darkest dark. Actually, you can see that little triangle shape. And then soften as you come out of that. Okay, we're going to come over here to this, the bottom left of this pear. Darken that a little bit more and soften it out. We can darken this shadow here just a little bit more also. Now remember, our light's coming in this way, so we want to keep the light highlight areas right up in here. And now we'll do this front one. I'm just dragging a little bit of that raw umber along the bottom edge. I'm going to curve that up a little bit on this end where it's behind the tag. And a little curve up a little bit on this end where the rounded end of the pear gives it some contour. Okay, at this point now, the only place that I see that I'd like a little bit darker would be where this very back pear meets this pear that's next to it. Those are getting a little bit mushed together, so I'd like to strengthen the shadow on this back pear just a little bit more. So I'm going to go one more layer of the raw umber. Just come up along that and soften as I'm just kind of letting it fade out as I come to the top because it's not as important up there. They were already, it's just in this darkest dark area down here that they were coming together just a little too much the same value. Okay, now I can see a little bit of a difference in value of this one that's in front of this one. But, you know, they're still close, but you want just a hair difference so that they don't just run together. So I think at this point that's a pretty good shading on our pears. They've got some form now. They look more rounded and have pear shapes. So the next thing I want to do, we're going to let that dry. And again, I'm not going to put water in this brush right now. Pinch it out and add a little hand sanitizer to keep that paint soft. Hand sanitizer works wonders if you have paint that's dried in your brushes. Put some hand sanitizer in and it'll just melt the paint away. May take 2 or 3 applications, but I just keep working it and wiping it on a paper towel and then adding some fresh hand. I like the gel hand sanitizer. I buy a big pump bottle at Sam's, and it works really good for keeping the brushes clean because I'm not very good at always cleaning as I go. Okay, our basket should be dry now, and what we're going to do now is put a glaze of color over it. And the first painting that we did on it in the burnt umber and raw umber was just to establish the shadows and highlights on the basket. Now we want to give it a little bit more of a basket color, so we're going to put a transparent glaze of the raw sienna, which is our kind of honey brown color. And to do that, I'm going to add some faux finish medium to my brush, pick up a little bit of the raw sienna and mix them together. Raw sienna is already a semi-transparent pigment, and the addition of the faux finish medium will make it more transparent. And then we're just going to go back and brush over just an even coat over the whole basket. And I find it easiest just to work in each section, following the direction our wood grain goes. So you can see here I've added the raw sienna over top of this outside one, and it's taking on kind of that golden color. But our shadows, because the pigment's transparent, the shadows still show through. So we don't have to worry about losing the values we already established. So we're just going to go through and color in each section of the basket. I'm just continuing to pick up a little more of the faux finish medium and a little bit of the raw sienna for each one. You want to make sure you have enough. Have a good mix so that you do get some golden color on the basket, but the paint's still transparent enough that your undershading shows through. Now I'm using the Traditions artist acrylics, and the really nice thing about these paints is, first, they're pure pigments, but if you look on the side of each bottle, it will tell you the qualities of the pigment. It tells you what the pigment number is. It tells you whether it's transparent, semi-transparent, whatever. It tells you the light fastness, and gives you more information on what the value and the saturation and hue of the pigment is. But this one is a semi-transparent. That's the raw sienna. So you know that's a good start when you're doing glazes. It's going to be transparent enough, especially if you add a little bit of one of the mediums, gel mediums, to it to let your underpainting show through, so it's a real good color for glazes. And glazing means adding a transparent color over top of an underpainting. So we're on our last little section of the bottom part of the basket. Then we're going to do the same thing on the rim. And as you're doing the glazes, make sure that the paint is still movable as you're brushing it. If it starts drying out, if part of it's dry and part of it's wet, you might start pulling it so it gets blotchy. So if it starts to look like that, just stop, let it dry, and then you can always go back and add another layer of glazing over top of it. I'm going to switch to a different brush for the handle so I don't mess up that background that I had to go back and clean up. So I'm just going to use like a small round or liner brush, but using the same mix of the faux finish medium and the raw sienna, and I'm just gonna, let's see, I did it anyway, paint over that basket handle to give it a golden color. I'm just checking to see if our pears are dry yet. I'm jumping around on things because you have to make sure each layer is very dry before you start putting another layer over top of it, because if you don't, you do have trouble with the underpainting picking up. But I think these pears feel dry. While we're waiting though to make sure, let's go ahead and paint in the crow. And I'm gonna just we want it to be a dark color, so you can either use black or, I'm looking for my paint bottles here as I'm knocking things over. A lot of times will mix a black using the raw umber and phthalo blue. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit of phthalo blue out here on the palette. That's a very intense blue, so you don't need very much of it. And I'm using just a small number 6 filbert, and I'm going to just brush mix a little bit of about half and half blue and raw umber. And I'm going to paint in the crow. The nice thing about mixing your black is that you can kind of tone it to the direction that you want. So if you want it to be a more blue-black, just add more blue. If you want it to be a more green-black, you can add more of the raw umber. think I'm going to add just a touch of the burnt umber into it, because the burnt umber is more red, so that'll turn it down even more. Okay, we're going to do a glaze over the pears, and I want these pears to be kind of a limey green color, so I'm going to put out a little bit of Hansa yellow, which is a real lemon yellow color. Bottle's getting a little bit thick. But here's this real bright lemon yellow, and we're going to add just a touch of the phthalo blue, and I mean just a touch, because it will really become fluorescent if you try to add too much. See? Goes way too much. Let's move over here to the side and tone that back down again. Pick up a little bit of that. So we're going to mix a little bit of the faux finish medium with that to make it more transparent, even though the Hansa yellow and the phthalo blue are semi-transparent colors. The faux finish medium will make it just a little bit more transparent. Then we're going to come along and just brush the glaze of that lime green color over the pear. Now if you want your pears more of a golden color, you can use, more of the raw sienna color with a little bit of the yellow. In fact, we could do a couple different colors of pears. They don't all have to be the exact same shade. Maybe this one here's got a more yellow color to it. And we're going to add some reds in it. Red tints on them. But you can see how fun it is when you start putting the glaze of color over top of the base coats. While your shading's still there, and now you've got this back when I'm making it a little bit more of a dirty green color by picking up a little bit of the raw sienna in the green. Tones it down just a little bit more, you can see it. Gives it a little more olivey color, which actually might be good for this one down here. Tone it down a little more. And pears end up having multiple colors, even in one pear. You'll see pears that are yellow with some tints of green or tints of red. So we just want right now to get the kind of the basic underlying color in. So I think that's a good start on those. And we'll let those dry. And while we're doing that, let's go down here and start working on the base of the little decoy. I'm going to put some red in my pears, so I want to add some reds to this base. I'm going to make this little like finial thing in red colors. So the first thing I want to do is add some shading. Well, yeah, let's add some shading to this. And we're going to do it in the same way that we were doing on the others. We're going to use some of this mix of black that we used for the crow. And let's shade the outside edge of this to the left again. That brush is a little too soft. Back to our little sable tech brushes. So I'm going to again shade this outer edge of the ball. Again, we're working, putting the shading on the opposite side of where our light source is coming from. So we've said our light source is coming from the right side. So we're adding the shading to this on the left. And I'm just kind of dry brushing this in. I'm not trying to be too precise. because our pieces are rather small. And we want to come down the left side of the spindle a little bit. And I'm using our black mix that was some burnt umber, little phthalo blue, and some raw umber. So you can see I've scrubbed down this little ball area, kind of a quarter moon shape on the left side, a little down the spindle, straight spots. This little ring here, again, just scrubbed a little shading to the left. And on the base here, I just dry brushed some shading in on the left side, softening it as it comes to the right. And right here where the little spindle comes down, I've actually just shaded in like a little cast shadow, like that little stick is causing a shadow toward the left behind it. Okay, so let that dry. And again, I'm not washing these dry brushes out in water. I'm going to clean it with a little bit of hand sanitizer. And then wipe it on a paper towel. Pinch it out. Now you can use these almost immediately, but I like to make sure the alcohol's kind of evaporated out of it before I actually go down and start working on my painting. So a lot of times I'll brush it on the back of my hand. If it feels cold, you know there's still probably some alcohol in it, but once it starts feeling room temperature, it's usually pretty safe to use. So I'd like to use some red colors in this painting, because I'm going to do the little spindle over here with the crow in some reds, and so to add some reds to the rest of the painting, I'd like to put some accents on the pears, and eventually we're going to have some little grapevine, or what I'm calling PearBerry vine, that's going to be painted in around here, and we're going to put some reddish colored berries on that with some little brown or greenish colored leaves to, again, pick up the colors that we've used in the rest of the design. So I'm going to put out a little bit of naphthol red light on the palette. Whoop. And this is just a nice bright orange red. And let's put a little bit of, let's do this big one here, which is kind of one of our main front pears. And I'm going to put a little bit of the faux finish medium on. Pick up a little bit of the red, and you can see that's pretty intense. And I just want to softly dry brush that, kind of over towards this highlight area, like this pear's getting ripe and It's just getting some red splotches on it. Add a little bit over here in this shadow area. You can see if I put some red over here on this side with the shadows that have a little more green in it. That red and green are complementary colors, so when you glaze one over top of the other, it just creates a little stronger shadow. Zoom in a little closer, see? If you can see that a little bit more. Strengthen those reds a little. You're better off building up slowly. You don't have to do it all in one layer, so it's easier to build up multiple transparent layers than to try to do it in one fell swoop. Maybe let's do some on this pear. I'm just scrubbing this color in. I don't have very much paint on the brush. Just a little bit of that finish medium. It just on this one down here, I got a little bit of a bright green line along where the basket was, and putting this red over it really tones that down and again sets it back. Because whenever you add complement colors to each other, they'll tone the other one down. So the red is the complement of green. They're opposite on the color wheel, and that really made that lime green line that I had there go away. Now you can just keep playing with your pears kind of as long as you want. Pears are fun to paint because there's so many little variations that you can do. Go down to your local farmer's market or grocery store that has a selection of them, and you can see how many different types of pears there are, and when you pick them up they've got all kinds of little spots and freckles and things that you can add to them to make them more unique, I guess. Clean the brush out with some hand sanitizer. And then I want to go back in and start patting in some highlights on the pears, and we're going to use opaque white. You can use titanium white or opaque white. I tend to use the opaque white more often than the titanium white, just because it covers a little bit better. But I'm just picking up a little on a filbert, and I'm going to pat it in where I think the highlights are hitting. And then just kind of soften out around it. You don't add a touch of yellow to it if you think it's too stark a white.